Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Vikings on SI. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Tony Liebert, Will Ragatz. Another exciting weekend of Minnesota football, guys. We'll start off with Vikings. We may hit Gophers at the end, but let's start off with this one, Will. 23-22, Vikings complete the comeback. Sam Darnold clutch once again late in the game. Your overall takeaways from the Vikings improving to 10-2 with a home win against the Cardinals, Will?
Yeah, I tried to film a recap video on this one from the U.S. Bank Stadium press box yesterday. Had some technical difficulties, but my overall takeaway was that this was just a resilient win for the Vikings. They did not look good for a big portion, 2.5 quarters of this game. I believe being down 19-6 late in the third was their biggest deficit they've faced this season. And it did not look good. The vibes were not good. Prior to that Marvin Harrison touchdown, the offense had gotten booed off the field after a sack and a 3-and-out. They were struggling to pick up blitzes, which it's hard to know exactly how much of that falls on Sam Darnold, how much falls on the offensive line, running backs. But the Cardinals were doing some things that were really confusing them. And then defensively, they were moving the ball, the Cardinals, and the Vikings were staying in it by forcing them to settle for some field goals. But it didn't look great. I really did not think they were going to win the game in that moment. And then they turned it on. And over the last 3 drives, Sam Darnold was the Sam Darnold that we've seen over the last couple weeks. Late in that Bears game, he was really clutch. He was good against the Titans. He was really good over the last 3 drives of this game. I think it was 12 of 17, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a scramble for a first down in there. Just really accurate, decisive, moving in the pocket. Being aggressive down the field. I think he missed some possibilities downfield earlier in the game, but he took those on those key drives, found Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, guys like that, and just really played well. And the Vikings were able to pull it out with, I would say, some help from the Cardinals head coach, Jonathan Gannon, for that decision he made to go for it to not go for it on 4th and goal from the 4, kick the field goal, go up 6. But yeah, I mean, good teams find ways to win games where they don't play well for parts of the game. And in this instance, the Vikings didn't play well for a lot of the game. But they found a way to get it done. And it's their second 5-game winning streak of the season. Kevin O'Connell is 24-9 with the Vikings in 1-score games. They just find ways to win games. And you can say all you want. We can talk about the comparisons of this team to 2022, and is this team really good enough to go on a run in the playoffs? But you can't argue with the results right now of just win after win after win in a game that they really needed to keep pace in the NFC North with the Detroit Lions.
Tony?
Yeah, I mean, Will kind of mentioned it at the end that Kevin O'Connell is just continuing to find ways to win these close games, and seeing that result over and over again of finding ways to win when you really almost shouldn't. You really were outplayed for much of this game. I think it comes down to the culture that O'Connell has with this franchise right now. It's really easy to, I guess, fold in that moment and be like, okay, we only have 2 losses. We can take a loss here, still make the playoffs, just move on to the next week. But they found a way to win. And I think that's a big culture win, that they don't give up in those moments. And, I mean, they are professionals, so you really shouldn't. But they just know Kevin O'Connell makes the right decisions at the end of games. We saw on Thanksgiving that some other coaches in Chicago maybe can't do that sometimes. But this team never, really shoots themselves in the foot too much. They just make the right play, and it's lended to a good record on the scoreboard with only 2 losses this year.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch, certainly, as this team has improved. 10-2 now on the season, boys. I want to do a little bit of an exercise here. As we look at this season, the team, as I said, sitting 10-2, just 1 game behind the Lions. If the playoffs started today, they'd be the 5th seed in the NFC playoffs, which, say what you want about how playoffs are structured in the NFL, but I think that's ridiculous that they would be the 5th seed behind some teams that would win their divisions at maybe a 500 record, if that. So that's a different topic for a different day that I know has been well discussed. But all right, let's run through this. Sam Darnold, he's been outstanding this season overall. He's had his ups and downs for sure. Had the 3-interception game against the Jaguars, but since then, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions in 3 straight games. He's been outstanding. Answer this for me and take as long as you want on it. Sam Darnold, top what quarterback in the NFL right now? Will you start then, Tony?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think he's really kind of settled into the area where Kirk Cousins was for most of his tenure. Like, I would say Sam Darnold is a top 12 quarterback in the league right now. I think he'd be in that 10 to 12 range, and there's maybe some stats that have him even higher than that. Certainly passing touchdowns. I think he's like 7th in passer rating. It might be even a little bit low for me, but that's I don't know. I would have to look through, go name by name. I think that's kind of a fair spot for him to be 12 games into this season. And the conversation is going to come up as we move forward and after this year, of the big picture Sam Darnold thing, and it's been a point of discussion recently because he's playing so well. Like, why wouldn't the Vikings bring him back next year? And Alex Smith says on ESPN's Sunday NFL Countdown that they'd be making a big mistake if they don't re-sign him. I mean, Alex Smith, it's an ironic messenger there because he was replaced by a younger quarterback with the Chiefs, and that worked out pretty well for them. But yeah, I just think Sam Darnold is going to he's played too well, where he's pricing himself out of the Vikings' plans next year. And that was kind of always the plan, that they have J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings to come take over. That's where the Daniel Jones thing we talked about last week could fit in. My point is I'm curious to see how Sam Darnold will do next year, assuming he does end up somewhere else. Like, how much of this is Sam Darnold figuring it all out and playing really well, because he deserves a bunch of credit, and how much of it is Kevin O'Connell is just really, really, really good at maximizing quarterbacks? Because guess what? Kirk Cousins, maybe getting up there in age and post Achilles, he's gone to Atlanta and looks like he misses Kevin O'Connell because he just threw 4 interceptions, including a pick 6 yesterday. And now is coming to Minnesota to play the defense that leads the league in interceptions. So I'm getting off track a little bit here, but I would say Sam Darnold is around that 10 to 12 range with the way that he's played this season. I'm curious if he will continue to be in that range away from Kevin O'Connell next year, assuming that is what ends up happening.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Will there. I think you can realistically make the case for him being in the top 10. Just going through, like, real quick, you obviously have Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, maybe. He's kind of had an up and down year, but probably still put him in that mix. And then you got Justin
Herbert in there,
Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts. So then right there, you're already getting to the 9-10 range, and then you got guys like Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, and Tua, where at the best, Sam Darnold has played at a similar level to those players. But then after that, he's pretty firmly in that 12 range. Because then you get in the discussion of guys like Baker Mayfield. Matthew Stafford, forgot about him. He can be up there. But I think it's a realistic argument for him to be that high on the pantheon of quarterbacks in the NFL this year. And we're so far into the season, I think it's past the point of saying that he needs to consistently show it, because I think he has. And he hit that rough stretch against the Jaguars, and I think that really could have been an inflection point on the season, that it could have went one of two ways, but he responded with great play the last couple of weeks. And yeah, I think there's no reason to think that he's not in that range.
All right, so 10 to 12 for both of you guys there on Darnold. Kevin O'Connell is a top what coach in the NFL, Will?
It's hard to argue against top 5 or top 3, or top 1 if you want to just talk about coach of the year this year. I think he's got to be number 1. I mean, this Vikings team was picked to win 6.5 games prior to the season, which was among the lowest Vegas win totals in the league. They're 10-2. They blew past that like almost a month ago. With Sam Darnold, who came into this year 21-35 as an NFL starter, he's now 10-2. Just everything that Kevin O'Connell's been able to do, and the players obviously deserve a lot of credit. His staff deserves a lot of credit, but it's O'Connell who is the leader of this organization, the leader of this culture. We see it in the post game locker room speeches that they post on YouTube, but that's him throughout the week. That's him on Saturday nights before the games. He gets his guys ready to play. From a leadership standpoint, he gets everybody on the roster ready to play. And then from an offensive standpoint, clearly what he's done with Sam Darnold has been extremely impressive. And the way that he's been able to, I mean, Justin Jefferson yesterday has 7 catches, 99 yards, and is continuing to produce. He was quiet against the Bears while everybody else went off. But Justin Jefferson second in the NFL in receiving this year, despite so much defensive attention. And that a lot of that is Kevin O'Connell and the different ways that he moves him around and schemes ways to get him open against heavy defensive attention. So I've been so impressed with Kevin O'Connell. I mean, since he got here, really, the 2022 season, obviously they had a negative point differential despite being 13-4. They weren't Super Bowl contenders, but still, you win 13 games in year one. That's not supposed to happen. And then last year he navigates the Justin Jefferson injury and then the Kirk Cousins injury. He won 3 games that were started by Jaron Hall or Josh Dobbs. 2 of those games had multiple different quarterbacks playing. Like the things he's been able to do within the circumstances of what the roster has looked like, it's just been very impressive. 30-16 now, the fastest coach to 30 regular season wins in Vikings history. I think he's like 5th in active winning percentage among coaches. There's other very good coaches in the NFL. I mean, Sean McVay still belongs in that conversation. Mike Tomlin belongs in that conversation. Both Harbaughs, I think you could put in that kind of. There's a lot of very good coaches. I'm sure I'm missing some obvious ones too, but Kevin O'Connell is right up there among the best of them at this very moment.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion when you look at coaches because they're obviously guys like Will mentioned, Mike Tomlin, Andy Reid, who have Hall of Fame level resumes that Kevin O'Connell simply doesn't have. But if you look in a 1-year sample size, there is very few people that you can be more impressed with the job that they've done for the reasons kind of Will said with Kevin O'Connell. That I think any person that looked at the NFL before the year would say that the Vikings did not have anywhere near even a top 10 to 15 roster in the NFL. And they are firmly outperforming those expectations. And I think that's a lot to do with Kevin O'Connell. So, I think it's totally realistic to say that he's in the top 5. And Dan Campbell's another guy that's obviously been doing well this year, but like Kevin O'Connell, he doesn't have that success in the playoffs so far to really put him in that discussion. So, O'Connell might need the deep playoff run to get the respect from the national media, so to speak. But everything he's done so far with the Vikings has been very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with you guys on that one. And then lastly, before the final question on this one, defense. The Vikings defense, take this however you want. Vibes, stats, whatever, however you want to discuss this one. The Vikings defense is a top what defense in the NFL? Will?
They're in the same kind of ballpark as O'Connell. They're top 5 at worst right now. I mean, DVOA, they're still number 1. I think opponent EPA per play, they're still number 1. I don't know right now that I would call them the very best defense in the NFL. Just there's been some leaks here and there. Yesterday against the Cardinals, they gave up over 400 yards of offense for the second time this season. Kyler Murray was able to scramble for some things. James Conner was running the ball. Kyler hits Trey McBride a bunch of times. Marvin Harrison had a few plays. It wasn't the stoutest play-to-play defensive effort, but this defense, and this was the case last year a bunch too, they just find ways to bend sometimes but not really break. And they gave up the 1 touchdown, and that was Stephon Gilmore had left the game with a hamstring injury. Fabian Moreau comes in, gives up a pass interference call. He was in coverage on the Harrison touchdown, which was really just an impressive throw and catch by those 2 guys. And then outside of that, they're able to really stiffen when they needed to in the red zone and hold the Cardinals to field goals. They had 7 trips to at least the 22. They settled for field goal tries on 6 of those, missed 1 of them. So when you're able to do that and be at your best in those moments, and then the other thing is that they continually force takeaways. They get the Byron Murphy Jr. interception. They steal the game on a Shaq Griffin interception. They've got 18 picks this year. They lead the league in that department. I think they're tied for second in total takeaways. They just make plays. They get Jonathan Grenard, who was sick all week and it was battling through it, and is able to get a forced fumble on Kyler Murray late in the game and a sack. They just make plays when they need to make plays. So this defense has earned that respect for what they've been able to do in the big moments. And I think they've been a top 3 defense this year at the worst.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. It's really hard to argue that they're much worse than 5 at minimum. But it's really, again, a testament to the coaching staff, Brian Flores, because if you ask a casual NFL fan or a fan on the street to name someone on the Vikings defense, they might name Harrison Smith just because of his longevity, but they just don't have like the surefire all-pro star on this defense, but they're playing like one of the best units in the NFL, which I think shows to the coaching staff because they're playing as a team. They make very few mistakes. Kind of everything Will said, that they're bend don't break, and they're always playing at the same level, and they don't let one big play affect the whole game. And it leads back to the culture thing that I just think this team and franchise, it's so well ran and well coached right now, which lends to them winning these close games.
Yeah, give credit to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah too. I mean,
yeah,
like you talking about, if you ask a random NFL fan to name people on the Vikings defense, they might still think Danielle Hunter was there or something like that, because he was really good here for a long time. And you lose, I mean, on offense, you lose Kirk Cousins. Defensively, you lose Danielle Hunter. I think a lot of people just point to, oh, the Vikings they're gonna be bad next year. Like, they're gonna take a big step back. It's gonna be a reloading year. And that just hasn't been the case, obviously. Sam Darnold has outperformed Kirk Cousins this season. Jonathan Grenard has been every bit as good as Danielle Hunter statistically, if not better this season, making a decent amount less than him. Andrew Van Ginkel, who they could also afford because they didn't pay Hunter and Cousins, has been phenomenal this season. Blake Cashman has been incredibly good. Like, those 3 free agents specifically, I think we have to give Kwesi Adofo-Mensah a lot of credit, and that can't really be overstated, bringing in those 3 guys. Because if we're going to rip on him for his draft classes, and justifiably so with 2022 in particular, we should also point out how good he's been at bringing in NFL like veteran talent, both via trades and then specifically in free agency this year.
So then when you put these rankings that you guys put together here, top 12 for Darnold, top 5 for the defense and Kevin O'Connell, that you would think those things combined would equal a Super Bowl recipe. But it feels like, with the national conversation and maybe some around the state as well, that this doesn't feel like a team that is in that conversation of Super Bowl contenders. They might be able to sneak in, like, hey, they might make a run, but it feels like there are certain things standing in their way and talking points standing in their way that this isn't a Super Bowl contending squad. Why is that? It just doesn't feel like they're in the same conversation as the Lions, the Chiefs, the Bills this year. Or the Ravens, maybe you want to slip them in there. The Eagles with how well they've played, but 10-2, you've got a top 12 quarterback, you've got a top 5 coaching staff and defense. That screams, to me at least, on paper, a Super Bowl recipe if I've ever seen one. And this feels like a very good squad to do it, but feels like there's still some things holding them back, Will.
Yeah, I think it's just maybe a little bit of that lingering hesitancy from, preconceived notions of what this team was going to be. And, oh yeah, they're 10-2, but they weren't supposed to be very good coming into the season. They've been winning a lot of close games, and it's still Sam Darnold. And to some degree, I suppose I get that, but I think this Vikings team, I'm not going to put them in the very, very top tier of Super Bowl contenders right now with, I'd say, the Lions, the Bills, the Eagles. I think those would be the 3. I don't want to put the Chiefs in there after the way that they've looked recently. I don't really want to put the Ravens quite in there. They're 8-5. I'm sure there's some other teams that belong in that conversation at least. But I think the Vikings are right there in that second tier behind those top 3 teams. And people can point to the 1-score wins, but guess what? In the modern NFL, there are a lot of 1-score games just across the league. Mm-hmm. I think the stat this week, I don't know exactly what it was, but almost every game this week, or the vast majority of them, were decided by 1 score. And that's just kind of how it is with the league, with this much parity, this much talent. It seems to happen week after week. So I don't think that should be used as some indictment on the Vikings. This is clearly better than the 2022 team. The point differential is better. Kevin O'Connell's more experienced. The defense is much better. The defensive coordinator specifically is much better. Sam Darnold is playing at a higher level right now than Kirk Cousins was in 2022. If you just look at the statistics, and Kirk Cousins was very good at times for Minnesota, but Sam Darnold has a little bit of just extra juice. I think that Cousins didn't have with his arm talent down the field, and then his ability to scramble and make things happen outside the pocket. So I think this Vikings team, they've got a chance. Now there are reasons why I'm not ready to put them in that very top tier yet. They need to take care of the ball better because they've been chaotic with the turnovers. They're up there near the league leaders in takeaways, and they're up there near the league leaders in giveaways. And Darnold hasn't thrown any interceptions the last 3 weeks, but we're still not that far removed from those Jaguars and Colts games. Aaron Jones has to hold on to the football, stop fumbling. It's 4 in 3 weeks for him. And then the offensive line, I think you could maybe point to as a slight question. They've been good, and I really like the Cam Robinson move to replace Christian Darrisaw. I think Dalton Reisner played a very good game in pass protection yesterday against the Cardinals, and that's been, I would say, an upgrade from Ed Ingram. So there's still some question marks maybe, but yeah, they 10-2. They deserve to be in that conversation, and of course the tough part is that they really might end up opening the playoffs on the road just with the way that the postseason is structured, and they're likely going to end up as the 5 or the 6 seed. But it's a very good team. They deserve some respect, and I think they'll start to gain it if they keep rattling off some wins here in the next few weeks.
Tony?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Will. I think they should be kind of the top of the second tier, because I think it's totally fair to not quite put them in the class with the Lions, Eagles, and Bills maybe, but their playoff run potentially, I think, should have an effect on their ceiling, because while they're right behind the Lions, and we all know that it's going to be hard to catch them in the divisional race, and being a 5th seed compared to a 1 seed is a big difference, and it impacts the potential you have in the playoffs. So that should be part of the factor. And I think if they were atop the NFC North, and let's say the Lions just weren't good and they were like a 500 team right now, there could be a little bit different of a discussion, I think. I think that's kind of adding to a little thoughts that people have, because the Lions have been the talk of the NFC North, and the Vikings are just kind of sitting behind with 10 wins. So I think it'll take a while for them to get the national media respect for that reason, that they kind of have to break through the story of the NFL this year. Everyone likes talking about the Lions right now, and the fact that they're in the same division, I think, has prevented the discussion about the Vikings on a national scale.
I think it's a solid point that being in the same division, being one game behind the Lions, is going to keep you out of that conversation quite a lot when the national media is looking at talking points. And it's been a good conversation. I like this. Lastly, on the Vikings, before I get to the Gophers question I have for you guys, this is the best Vikings team since when that you guys have watched over the years? We've all been in Minnesota all our lives. We watched different variations of this team over the years. This is the best Vikings team for you since when? Tony, I'll start with you, then Will.
That's a good question, because you obviously go back to the 2022 year. But I think this team's better than that. I'm terrible with years off the top of my head, but
it's 2017 when they made the run with Case Keenum and had the number 1 defense. There was 2009 with Favre, and you go back to 1998, obviously. A couple other years maybe in there as well.
Yeah, I don't think they're as good as the 2017 team. I think this defense is really good, but I think that was like a historically good defense. I just remember that year going into each week was a little different vibe, but I think they're definitely close to that year. And it's weird because the Vikings have kind of had these runs every year with a lot of questions at quarterback in a lot of these close games, and you blink and then they have a 13-4 record, 13-3, or how many ever regular season games they were playing that year. And there's questions on the national scale, but they just keep winning. I think they're better than 2022, but I wouldn't go as far as saying they're on the 2017 level yet, but I do think they can get there.
Will?
I would disagree with that. I think this is the best Minnesota Vikings team since 2009 when Brett Favre was here playing at a very high level. I just think that 2017 team was quite good, and they were led by the best defense in the league, which was maybe a bit better than this defense this year. But this defense this year is also number one in the league in several categories. The difference for me is I think this quarterback has a bit of a higher ceiling in the playoffs if he's playing like he has the last 3 weeks than Case Keenum did. And I just think the roster, top to bottom, the head coach, it's a little bit better for me than that 2017 team. And that team was very good. They beat a good Saints team in the Miracle Game. They were 13-3, but they go to Philly and they just get absolutely blown out in that game. It's hard for me to see this specific Vikings team getting blown out by really anybody. And that, with that said, anything could happen. It could absolutely happen if Darnold has an off day at the same time as the defense has an off day, something like that. But it hasn't happened once this year in 12 games. They haven't lost. I mean, they lost by 10 points to the Rams, but they haven't been beaten soundly by anybody. And it looked for a second like it might happen against the Cardinals, and it didn't. I just think Sam Darnold, more so than Case Keenum, has the upside to, if not win a Super Bowl, win a few playoff games and go on a real run. And my faith in Kevin O'Connell as the head coach, just the roster, the guys that they have on both sides of the ball, Jefferson and Jones and Hockenson and Addison, and defensively, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Cashman, all of these guys. Harrison Smith is still around from that team. But I think this team is better than 2017. I think this is the Vikings' best shot since 2009 with Brett Favre to win a Super Bowl. And it's going to be tough because they might not have the home field advantage. And I also don't necessarily think it'll be the Vikings' best chance to win a Super Bowl in the Kevin O'Connell era, for example. If J.J. McCarthy hits, that is when things could really, really, really get interesting because of the rookie contract and what else they could bring in. But yeah, I think this team is better than the 2017 team.
You say that they may not have home field advantage, but look at the Lions' schedule, man, coming up here. They've got the
next
Packers
2 games.
And they've got the Bills. And we just saw what the Bills did to the 49ers last night in the snow in Buffalo. That is a very, very dangerous team. That is going to be possibly a Super Bowl preview if you ever have one late in the season. And they've still got the 49ers. They still got to go to San Francisco. You can say what you want about the 49ers this season, but they still are a pretty good roster overall. Packers, Bills in the next 2 weeks. That's a tough stretch for the Lions.
The only thing that helps them out is they get both of those games in Detroit. But yeah, the Lions, I haven't been following it as super closely, but I think they've got some defensive injuries kind of piling up, and I don't know. They looked vulnerable in that Thanksgiving game that the Bears probably should have won, or at least should have gone to OT. And yeah, so the Lions, they might not go 16-1. They might slip up at some point here.
And the Vikings have to keep pace, certainly. All right, last question of the day for you guys. Guys, we saw the Gophers get a win over the Badgers, a big win, on Friday night or on Friday afternoon, and return the axe. This was the final regular season game of the year for the Gophers. Max Brosmer obviously was talked about heavily coming into the season, Tony, and as the transfer portal quarterback. Did he live up to your expectations, exceed them, or not live up to them? How do you feel about how Max Brosmer did this season as the Gophers quarterback and how he kind of fared against those expectations placed on him coming into the season?
Yeah, I'll admit the Gophers overall, they didn't dramatically exceed my expectations, but they definitely exceeded them. Kind of the way that last year ended, the play calling, quarterback situation, everything. I was skeptical that they could change it as much as they did. Even after week 1 against North Carolina, there were a lot of issues in that game. But that halftime of that Michigan game, it flipped, and they were competitive in every game they played the rest of the year. And I think it's credit to Max Brosmer. I think he was a really, really good leader for this team, which is a huge part of being a college quarterback. And coming from the FCS level, it could really go both one of two ways. There's been plenty of quarterbacks that have done that in this new transfer portal era that have struggled. But then you look at guys like Cam Ward. He came from FCS school originally. He completely turned into a really good college quarterback. And Brosmer specifically has exceeded my expectations a lot. I think you could make a real argument that he's been a top 10 to 15 quarterback in the country. If you put him on any of the other top rosters in the country, realistically, I think if you put him on Ohio State, I think Ohio State goes undefeated this year. So he's exceeded my expectations, and I think he's putting the Gophers program and the quarterback position specifically in a really good situation going forward.
Certainly was interesting to watch this season. Boys, been fun talking to you. Been fun discussing Minnesota sports and Minnesota football in particular, because it was a big weekend for that. We'll have another video coming up tomorrow on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel across Minnesota sports. We'll have most of the staff with us again tomorrow. For those watching on YouTube, do be sure to hit the subscribe button. It does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here on the YouTube channel. Boys, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Minnesota sports fans, we'll be right back here with another topic across Minnesota sports.